Hi everyone, good morning. Let us today talk about pivoting data in pandas, which helps us for aggregation. Pivoting data in pandas uh, is a powerful technique for restructuring and aggregating data, especially when you want to summarize information across multiple dimensions. So you can also do pivoting in Excel. You can create a pivot table and play with the rows and columns to generate a different style and different kind of insights. Similarly, Pandas also offers you options to pivot data when you are particularly dealing with large data frames and you want to analyze a specific set of rows and columns for your own analysis. This will help transform your data layout and enable summarizing. This helps for data analysis and visualization. So you also have option of reversing the pivoted data table to original format in pandas. So the three methods for pivoting data in pandas are pivot, pivot table, and these two functions, pivot and pivot table, help you with pivoting, while melt function helps you to revoke the pivot. Now let us look at the implementation of pivot tables in pandas. Now we are looking at the Jupyter notebook. So as a first step, I will import pandas. So I'm giving PD alias to the pandas library, and then I am creating a data frame using a dictionary. In the dictionary, I am using three columns: date, product, and sales. And I'm creating a data frame with it. It is a very small data frame. And if I run this code, I will be able to create the data frame. And this is my data frame. So there are only 4 rows numbered 0 to 3 and 3 columns in that. Right. So now if I pivot the data frame. So we will first start with using the pivot function. So it is used to reshape your data by converting the unique values in a column to separate columns, right? We will use this first. This function has certain limitations because it doesn't perform aggregation, but simply recognizes the data. So let us first try with it before we get into the more broader and more versatile function of pivot table. So first I am pivoting the data, right? So the index of this will be date and the columns will be product, and based on the unique values of sales, I am pivoting the data. So if I run this piece of code, this is how I'm getting my output. I hope this output is visible and understood. So on each date, because there are only 2 unique dates, on each date, how much was the sales of A and how much was the sales of B, right? So the unique values of the column chosen will be your new columns in the pivot form, and the values of sales will come there as cells in the cells, and the values of date, the unique values of dates will be your rows, right? This is the pivot form. But what if we had a duplicate entry of, on the same date, we have 2 products and their sales? What do we do then? For that purpose, we have another function called pivot table, right? So the difference between pivot and pivot table is that pivot function doesn't perform aggregation, but simply recognizes the data. Let us now create a table very similar to the previous one, where I have an extra row, right, with 5 rows now. So for the same date, what if I, on the same product, what if I have 2 sales? So let us understand the function pivot table using this data, which has multiple rows for the same value of date and product. So I'm recreating the data to suit my requirement of having an extra row. And then now using the pivot table function, I am pivoting the data. Pivot table function is more versatile. So it also allows aggregation. So this is useful when we have duplicate index column pairs, right? This can also, the aggregate functions that you can perform will be like, mean, your sum, minimum, maximum, all of that on these duplicates. So what am I saying is df.pivot table. If you note, the syntax is also very similar. I specify the index, I specify the columns whose unique values will be the columns in the pivoted form of table. The values in the cells will be the sales, and the aggregation function that I'm going to use is sum. I will try to print the data frame before we get into this function. So df will now hold these values. So you have 5 rows, and the first row, the 0th row, and the row with index 2, both are of the same date and of the same product, and you have different sales value, right? So when I pivot it, right, so I will, using the pivot table function, I will have an output like this. So if you see, because the aggregation function was chosen to be sum, on this date, for the product A, because there were 2 entries, the values of 100 and 150 are summed up to give you a 250, right? And if you kind of reset the index, this is how you're going to get your day and the unique values of the product column, how much sales has happened. This pivot table has a lot of applications. You will be able to analyze or visualize your aggregations and summations with a simple command. Now, how do I retrieve back my data frame? From the data frame where you also reset your index, from this, I melt my data frame, right? So my ID vars are dates, right? These are my identity variables based on which I will unpivot the data frame, right? So the variable name will be product whose unique values are your A and B, right? So now you have pivot data frame where your A and B are now columns. What we are going to tell in this command of melting is that these values A and B belong to a column called product. And the value name is called as sales. So when I use this melt function, I can always restructure my data frame to get my original data frame back. You always need not use this melt function to restructure back to the original shape. You can modify the shape the way you want, right? Now, if I see data df, this is how I'm going to get melted df, right? Let us see melted df. So this is your data frame, and I'll also display the melted data frame for our comparison. If you see, the aggregation cannot be reverted. Do we see that? The aggregation that we have performed cannot be reverted now, right? But the duplicate entries or the return table from the melted data frame is one that aggregates the duplicate rows of the original data frame, right? Now, your aggregation function doesn't have to be single aggregation function. You can also use multiple aggregation functions. So I'm demonstrating that I'm using the pivot table function to pivot the original data frame. But now I'm using 2 aggregation functions, sum and mean. If I run this code, this is how you get them printed. For sum, it will print one set of values. For mean, it will print another set of values. Do you see that? Yes. So I hope that this video throws some light on how do I pivot data in pandas. Now, based on these functions, You can also, when you can try these functions on larger data types also. And then you can also larger data sets, and you can also play with the columns the way you want and the way you want to understand. This is the end of pivoting data in pandas for aggregation.